Okay. So now we're going to move on to the polo wrap. Is that what you have next? Okay. So show us how you've stored those. Jane mentioned it, but can you show us how you do it if you just finished one and then you're going to put the others away so they're neat and tidy in the barn? Open up the tongue of one and then you wrap it around and then you tuck the two corners in. That way too, if you drop it by accident, it's not like unrolling a whole ball of yarn. That's great. And then it's easy to grab them. You can almost use one hand to grab full polos when you're reaching into the cabinet. All right, so let's, first I'd like you to show me what I typically see in polo wrapping. And it's very common. Polo wraps are very common. You can do damage with polo wraps though. So I'm going to have Melissa wrap this incorrectly. And would you stop right there? Come a little farther around. Yep, keep turning and stop right there. Now you can see that she is right now wrapping from the inside to the outside of the tendon. She's pulling across the tendon from the inside out. And that's actually incorrect, and we're going to do it correctly later, but I wanted to show you that from the top. The polo wrap should be pushing from the outside in. Okay, so there's one mistake that I really often see. Okay, and now you can sort of see that she's going down and there's kind of a gap and there's not quite so much even spacing and she's well below the fetlock. Yep. So this is a very typical polo wrap that I see that I always would like to give a polo wrapping lesson. So I want you to point a few things out for me. First of all, I want you to point to how low it is. That's way too low. We are really wanting to support the ankle and to support the fetlock, but we're not going to go that far down. And the reason is, now look around the front, Melissa. Do you see that big gap in the front? Yep, now if you could back up and just, yeah, perfect. See how there's even loose material there. So where there's loose material in one place, there's going to be tight material in another place. You can also see that the distance between her wrapping rolls are very different. That is uneven pressure. Ideally, the polo wrap starts at the top. It goes down to the middle, the depth of the fetlock, down around the bottom of the fetlock, and back up with even pressure. So could you take that one off, Melissa, and show us a really great polo wrap? So it's very common and it takes a lot of practice. You've got to look at it, you've got to do it slowly, you've got to be diligent, and you just have to practice. One or two times when I was learning and I was growing up, when I came to the ring with my polo bandages that were on incorrectly that my trainer would take off before I could ride, you really learn to polo bandage correctly and quickly. How about you, Jane? Anybody ever take your bandages off? I did. They did for me in Pony Club.
They did?
Yes. Good. So now you can see that as she's wrapping, the spaces in between the wraps, and she's being very careful about that, and she's made a few little adjustments, are equal. And I'll have her point that out to you when she's finished with the Velcro. The other piece about making the Velcro, you don't want to stretch that last section or that Velcro piece more tight than the rest of your bandage. It has to be all uniform. Okay, so now show us the bottom of that wrap. Again, that goes just to the back and the bottom of the fetlock. Then it starts to come back up. And then there's equal spacing all the way around until the very last one. And it's okay if you go around the top once extra, but any more than that, then your spacing was probably a little bit too big. So this one looks fine, but a lot of times when I look at a horse's bandage that looks the right height, I'll see this big fat bulge right behind the knee. That tells me they probably went 3 or 4 times around with the polo wrap before they fashioned the Velcro. Okay, so let's just do a hind leg if you don't mind, Melissa, because you really also have to know the length of your polo wraps, okay? So you generally, when you buy polo wraps, they all come in the same size, but certainly if you buy different brands, some are a little longer than others, and you really need to know where you need to start. And Melissa doesn't know these wraps and she doesn't know this horse, so she's going to give it a try, and if we feel that we don't end up in the right place, then we have to do it again. So she's starting mid cannon bone. She's going down around the bottom of the fetlock joint and back up. And could you stop there and show us the little V that you just made in the front of the fetlock? She's going to make that a little more clear. So you can see where the bottom layer and the next layer up made a V right in the center of the fetlock joint. That's important, so it gives the horse a little bit more freedom in the joint and it won't pinch. And then equal spacing all the way up. Beautiful. So it looks like you got lucky since you didn't know those polo wraps, huh?
Not lucky.
Not lucky. Good, good answer.
But I think it's interesting to note that because we know that the hind leg is longer, that she started the polo wrap in front at the top.
That's
and
right.
You started the one on the hind leg a little bit below that, just sort of anticipating that you want to end up at the top like that.
Excellent. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the combination of the external bandage and the under wrap, which when Jane was talking about it earlier, it's a bit of a compromise between polo wrapping and booting. Like Jane said, that boots have a lot more protection and wrapping has more support. They're at this end, Melissa. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to use those very elastic bandages with an under wrap. Now, I don't recommend using these if you are new to wrapping altogether. They are very tricky to get even pressure, and if you are wrapping too tight, you can make a bandage bow or a pressure bump, which none of us wants to have. So it's very important that both pieces of this layer here, of this section, are equal. So she's putting on the under wrap, and I want you to do that again, and that was very good what you did. You put it on a little high, and you slid it down to where you wanted it. Just like when you put your horse's saddle pad on, you would never pull the saddle pad forward to adjust it. It would move the hair in the wrong way. Same thing with your wrapping. Always move it with the direction of the hair. So now she's layered that under wrap on nice and straight and nice and even, and she's going to take her bandage around in very even, not pulling. You notice she never pulls more on the front or the back of the leg when she's wrapping around than any place else. It's a smooth, steady pressure, and because she rolled them properly, you don't have to pull. It's a snug, firm tension, but never stretched to capacity. And then she's coming back up the leg, and she's going to go to just below the knee. You're going to see a little bit of the under wrap showing on the top, and you're going to see a little bit of the under wrap on the bottom. Good. So these are quite long, so the next time we'll know that we'll want to make our distances a little smaller on the way down maybe. But you can see even here with having gone around 2 or 3 times at the top, how even and symmetrical. There's no bumps, there's no bulges, there's nothing sticking out, there's no gaps of material. So, and I want you to do something for me. I want you to take your thumb or finger, just put it down behind his knee and see how tight that is and see what you feel there. It should feel just like sort of a loose ace bandage, never pulled tight. And you'll frequently see me do that when I'm teaching or I'm doing a clinic and somebody comes in. I'll just check to see how tight they are, because you can really do a lot of damage if you're going around with bandages that are inappropriately too tight.
Now, you mentioned the bandage bow. How does somebody recognize that they've created one, and then what do they do?
All right, let's pull that wrap off, and we'll show you some areas that frequently can get pressure damage from wrapping or bandaging. Okay, so Melissa, just run your hand down the back of the tendon, okay, and sort of grip it with your forefinger and your thumb. If you feel any unusual, and by the way, you should know what your horse's tendons and ligaments look like on a daily basis before and after riding. If you feel any pressure or any odd bump as you're running your hand down those tendons and ligaments, then you need to be aware of it and keep an eye on it and check it and maybe have the vet look at it. Now, Melissa, run your hand flat down the back of the tendon. That's correct. Most of the time, when you create a pressure injury or a bandage bow, you're going to feel the bump on the back, right like that, okay? Most of the time when I see pressure bumps or pressure bows, it's because they started too low, like 3/4 of the way down with the wrap starting there. And that's the end, that's the very top of their wrap, okay? You want to support that tendon and ligament structure all the way up to the back of the knee. That's right, up there. So if you were to run your hand flat down like that, and you felt an unusual lump like a small grape maybe, even that little, and sort of that kind of firmness, then you might be considering having looked for a little pressure bandage bow. Okay? Another question about that?
No, I think that's
Okay,
great.
let's talk about the stable bandage. Okay? The stable bandages are very useful for lots of things. I am not a big proponent of wrapping my horses every night, but I do use them when necessary. For example, if I have had a very hard workout or I've been to a show and I would like the horse's tendons and ligaments to have a little bit more help overnight, Melissa will put a poultice on. And over the poultice goes a standing bandage. Or if your horse has a little cut and they need some furicin or something that they need to have this support bandage on, or for wind puffs, they're very, very useful. So again, you saw her put the quilt around, and now she pulled it down slightly, and now she's tucking in the ends so that there's no little gap or bubble anywhere around. And you can see that it's higher than the knee a little bit. That's okay, because we're going to bandage to just below the knee. So it's all right if there's a little bit of quilt above the bandage in this case. And again, we'd rather have our underquilts on the long side than too short, okay? Now she's going to use the same theory and technique of equal pressure down. She's going to come down and support some of the fetlock, just like our polo bandage. And then she's going to come back up and angling up with equal swirls around so that there's equal pressure all the way back up the leg to her last go round. So that's quite a nice looking stable bandage, and it's really your preference. I also have some sets that are flannel that are a little bit less elastic that I like with big puffy quilts, and what she's doing here is she's just making sure there is no wrinkles or anything along there on the back side to cause any uneven pressure. Very good, and you can see that she kind of tests it with both hands, because she's on the horse's left side. She can't see everything, so she's going to use both sides of her hands and just run it down, and it should feel even and smooth all the way through. Excellent. Great.
Looks beautiful.
Okay, so let's talk about the difference. Leave that on for just a second and grab the shipping wrap. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the same principle as the standing wrap in terms of which direction and the spacing, but because we're traveling in the horse trailer and oftentimes when they lose their balance, they might step on themselves. You can see that at the bottom of this stable bandage, you can see all of the coronary band and all of the bulb of the heel and a little bit of the pastern. Our goal when we covered the horse for shipping with a shipping bandage is to not have anything left showing and sort of out there for the other leg to step on. All right, you can pull that off, and then we will show the difference between the stable bandage and the shipping bandage.